Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, music does make the world go round, but when you have to compose music to drive the story of someone else's life, it's a bit of a different beast. And you know, if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. And if you are listening, hit that subscribe button. Give us your 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available everywhere, pretty much. Like places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over our In the Seats YouTube channel, so give us a like and subscribe there, too. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the Letterboxd, we're on the TikTok, and you know, we're probably at a few other places too. At where else would we be? At In the Seats, for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, pay us a visit. On this episode, you bet it, you guessed it, we are talking about more Emmy-nominated artisans who work hard behind the scenes on our favorite films and television shows. On this episode, we're diving into Still, a Michael J. Fox movie. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a fantastic piece of work on Apple TV Plus now, and we had the unique pleasure of talking with the man who composed the music for the film, the one and only John Powell, whose work you may know from a bunch of animated films like Ants, Chicken Run. He's got a bunch of credits, but we talked about the challenges of the job, getting the job, but also, you know, having to sort of style music for this very unique and compelling individual, and sort of understand the nuances therein, and really the difficulties of or the challenges therein of composing music for a documentary. And this is the first time he's done that, even though he's already had 70 credits to his name. So, I mean, there's definitely a bit of a wrinkle there. And he is nominated for an Emmy for his work on this film, deservedly so, as always. But it was interesting. I love talking to composers, too, because it's such a job that really adds so many layers to a film. And, I mean, I think he does a great job with his score on this film. But you know, like I always say, if you've not had a chance to check out Still, a Michael J. Fox movie, which is available on Apple TV Plus now, hurry up, go sign up, check it out. It is well worth the watch. But first, please enjoy our talk with composer John Powell, because between you and me, it's a darn good one. All right. Hey, John, how you doing today?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate this.
Pleasure.
Now, I guess my first question is just to kick it off. Like, I'm always curious, especially when it comes to your job composing, particularly for a documentary. Like, when do you get brought into the process? Like, are you getting talked to early on, or are you basically seeing a finished movie and, okay, we need music now?
You make it sound as if I knew what I was doing. This was the first one I'd ever done. I'd never really thought of doing them. For a variety of reasons, which I've now discovered is mainly they're really hard to do. And no, I wasn't in terribly early, and I wasn't in terribly late. I just came in and met Davis, and he showed me a few little bits, and I was sold. I just thought it was a very unusual documentary, and it seemed to be that it was almost virtuosic in how he was doing it. The very first scene I saw was how they'd intercut Michael's day job and night job when he's doing Back to the Future at night,
Right.
The TV show in the day, and they cut it with Alan Silvestri's music, which is one of the great scores of all time. So I sat there and watched that, and I was just struck by the incredible sort of energy that was being built in the film. And everything that Davis said, to me sounded like it would be fun. And that's not really, quite often great filmmakers are difficult. Let's put it that way. But that's good, because that's how good films get made. And I'm getting to that point in my life where I'd prefer to be working on things that are really going to be good. And but he was such a delight, and he seemed so smart, and so he kind of drew me into it about halfway through his process. Yeah, that's right. He'd cut everything, but he had to shoot the recreations.
Right.
And he went off and shot those recreations. I worked on some themes and things, and then when he came back, then we started work, really.
Now, I mean, do you think like that's kind of where you found sort of the tone and the theme for the music overall? Because I mean, again, especially because it's about somebody like Michael J. Fox. I mean, if you were a hack, you'd be, trying to rip off Family Ties or Huey Lewis in the News to make it sound like something like that. But you stayed away from a lot of that. Like, how important was it for you to really craft something unique for the film, as opposed to trying to just play off of what Michael's greatest hits were?
Well, it was a question to Davis, which is, why on earth are you calling me? I don't do documentaries. And that's a useful sort of poke at him, just to say, what are you really thinking? And he basically said, I felt for Michael, we needed to get somebody from his world. Even though I'd never worked on a film with Michael, it was kind of this idea that having somebody who does features, I think, would give it a slightly different approach. And early conversations. I mean, the very first meeting with him, when I was looking at things, he showed me another scene, and he'd tempt it with something that was a little maudlin. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well," I said, I am I wrong? But it strikes me that Michael J. Fox, is not that person. Why are we sad for him? The guy does not give a fuck. He's got no fucks to give. He's taking life in a way that that the rest of us admire. The energy he puts into his life. So I think the music should have energy. I said, it's not that we have to just make it funny, but because it was a difficult situation. The scene was difficult. You could tell it was difficult. I said, but if I say that to the audience, it immediately establishes something that we're sorry for Michael. We should be sorry for Michael. He doesn't want that.
No,
And I think that was what Davis realized, was that I was a bit clued into, and perhaps other composers would have taken it more literally as, it's a Parkinson's film. So I think between that and what I then saw in the cutting between the incredible energy that they were already starting to put in the film, I just took it as Michael's a dancer, I'm just going to write a ballet. I think I said that to Davis. And I think that's what the tone we knew we had to get. How the details of that took quite a while to really sort of work out. Everything from just the size of the ensemble, what was in the ensemble, was quite hard for me to work out. I normally do all these big things, and so by sizing everything down, I think it put it in the right place for the I don't know, the tone of the film.
No, I would agree with that. Yeah.
So it was a really interesting exploration of kind of what music does for picture, and this was very much a hybrid. It was not, I think the only thing that was hard was trying to find it. Stories are normally sort of set up in scripts. There's no script for something like this. In this documentary, it's all about what Davis was able to capture, and then with Michael, and then what he created, as far as recreations of the life, so he could intercut with that, and then this incredible job that the editor had done, finding all these pieces of Michael's sort of TV and films to use as counterplay with the story that they were telling, and so it was virtuosic. I mean, I could tell that, and I just needed to find the right language, and it took quite a while. It was very hard. I'm not going to tell you anything. It's like, I'd love to tell you it should sound easy, but it was really, really, really hard.
Well, and I mean, just in talking to you, I mean, this really does feel like it was a chance for you to probably sort of flex your creativity a little bit. Because I mean, I can imagine on some of the bigger stuff, like you've done, like some of the action movies or the animated movies. I mean, there's going to be a certain energy, there's going to be a certain tone to it. But I mean, when I was doing my research and I saw that you did Lockdown and I saw you did Don't Worry, Darling, I mean, those were definitely a little different as well. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, when you go into a job, like, how do you try to find, I guess that creative inroad to do something unique for the piece?
It depends what point in my career you're talking about. uh, you've you're basically talking about things in this very late part of my career, and really, what I've decided now is to try and do films where I'm useful. Um, and by that I mean that there's a lot of really good people out there who can do other stuff. So they can do action films and they can do animation and things. If it feels like it's something that there's not quite a way of describing, or it's like working with Olivia was interesting. I mean, that was her second film and really her first composer, as it were. And so I think what was great was to be able to try things for her and show her the possibilities of what a score can do, because up until then she'd only really worked with needle drops, as it were.
Right.
And so she pushed me into something very creative, and I like that. And I think the same with Davis. He pushed me into something creative, and they're wonderful people themselves, and they're both wonderful filmmakers. And I had huge respect for what they were doing. So there was never any doubt in my head that we would find good stuff. And so that means you relax, and you're not feeling as if you're on edge, you're struggling in any way other than the fair struggle of what could this film sound like? What could this story sound like?
No, I mean, I'm curious, as a musician, like, what got you into sort of the realm of film composing? Because I mean, again, it never seems that it's a straight line. Like, whenever I talk to other composers, there's always seems to be some sort of inroad that led sort of landed them here, and I'm curious what yours is.
I just liked, from the age of 7, I liked music because it spoke this language that seemed to bypass the difficulty I had with English, with words, which seemed terribly limited to me. I could not find anything that ever explained the extraordinary complexity of what I was starting to feel emotionally, aged 6, 7, 8. And then my father, who was a musician, took me, and I heard the violin concerto by Mendelssohn in E minor, and it just sort of suddenly became a 4-dimensional language, and I could see things and feel things without even being able to find the words, or even sometimes in music, the joy for me of music is that you cannot even imagine the scenario, the story, the explanation, the words, but there's this feeling. And it's not just a simple feeling, it's just not all sad or happy. So music was this kind of language that I wanted to learn to speak, and so I just followed that, and I thought, well, I'd do it by playing, but I really wasn't going to be good enough. And so I started to compose, and I went through college studying composition, and then it's very hard to try and figure out then how you're going to. I wanted to keep doing music. I just didn't know how I was going to make a living. So I started doing adverts, music for adverts. And that's the first time I came in contact with somebody saying to me, can the music do this? Can it support this idea? In that case, sometimes it was like, can it sound more chocolatey? Or things. But I think I'd never then come around to this question of, can music work in this in combination with storytelling, and that's a bit of a stretch for adverts, but it sort of set me up for then realizing maybe films would be interesting. And I started to watch films in a different way, having always loved films and loved scores, but not really made the connection, because I just loved the score to The Great Escape. It wasn't about how it worked with the picture. It was just musically, I liked it, So then I started to, develop that skill, and I just happened to meet Hans, and then I was helping Hans on something, and then he invited me over to America, and then bing, Face Off. So and also working on, like, The Prince of Egypt was the first animation I'd ever done as well. I just did working on the songs, and so it was just suddenly being thrown into that situation, having always loved music and wanted to make music, and here was Hollywood, paying me to make music with some of the greatest musicians in the world, and it was just sort of too good to be true. So I started to work very hard at it.
No, I mean, I'm curious because there's something I've always been fascinated about the job of composer, because I mean, really at the end of the day, the image and the music, I mean, they go together like, chocolate and peanut butter, like one can of kind, in many ways the image can't exist without the music, and vice versa, especially when you're putting together like a film. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, for you, where does the creative payoff come? Because on one end, at least to me, a great score is something that I'm on one side of my brain appreciating from a musical standpoint, but on the other side of my brain, I'm not even noticing is there, but it's evoking something different in me as I watch the story unfold. For you, when you're putting something together, what is I guess the payoff at the end of the day when you get to see finished product? Is it sort of, maybe a musical trick that some of us may have not noticed, or just sort of the reaction in the right moment that you hoped it would evoke?
I'm more selfish than that. I mean, honestly, the moment for me is when I'm at home alone in my studio here, and I'm working on something, and I see it work,
Right.
and I see another dimension coming out because of how we're making the music work.
You're the first one in on the secret. I like that.
Yes, and that's an incredibly creative moment. I mean, there's the creativity of trying to write music, but then in this combination with image, as you say, I mean, and there's a whole cinematic language that I'm looking for visually, and then there's the storytelling as well. So they're sort of almost like two factors. Obviously, the storytelling needs to lead, but I think it's very interesting, the history of cinema, and why we, this singular perspective camera, we're still there, even though this has been around for 150 years. We're still basically taking, until you get to games where it's interactive, or who knows what's coming. But at the moment, it's a singular view, and that view changing is the language of who you look at and what you look at and what happens while you're looking is the language. So the camera is the sort of, is this fourth dimensional voice I find when I'm watching. And so I think the first part of my career, I did it just instinctively, and was probably a bit, sort of just not knowing what the fuck I was doing. But then I worked with George Miller on Happy Feet, and he taught me so much about storytelling. And then, so that filled in a lot of the gaps. So I became a much better film composer of Happy Feet, I think, or at least more consistent. So that's the thing, is that the pleasure of making music is the main thing, but then the pleasure of making music and then watching how it shifts, inside this other kind of creative endeavor. It's great. And so but then there's the moment when you get to the orchestra and they play it for the first time, and it's and it works either better than you could have expected, or as well as you hoped. So and the musicians I get to work with are just extraordinary. Yeah, sure, they're in it for the money, but You know, I because my father was a session musician, I always try and give them something. I hate the idea of going in with musicians or an orchestra and giving them something that doesn't value what they can bring to it as
Yeah.
much as I can.
Well, I mean,
I can hear my father's voice saying, this is rubbish. So, why are you giving this to some of the greatest players of all time? So you write something proper for them.
but I mean, John, just you know what, man? Thank you for diving into the deep end and doing this documentary because I mean, the music here definitely elevates this piece to something special, and I think you've done a fantastic job with this. But I mean, again, thank you for the work and thank you for the time today.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.